Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our quarterly webinar on regulatory updates in the transport of hazardous materials and hazard communication field. ICC is sponsoring this today. ICC is a private company that deals with supplies and services for companies in the hazmat business. So we've got all sorts of products. If you are doing a hazmat shipment, we've got publications, we've got packaging, marks and labels for your non-bulk packages, placards for your vehicles and bulk containers, shipping paper blanks, and computer programs. So everything that you would need basically to prepare a shipment, we should have. If we don't, we can either make it for you or should be able to source it for you. So please consider us when you are looking for supplies for your hazmat needs. My name is Barbara Foster. I'm one of the regulatory experts here at ICC, and I just realized that in a couple of months it is going to be my 37th anniversary working with ICC. Specializing in the field of hazmat or dangerous goods transportation regulations, and also the hazard communication regulations, such as in the United States, the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, and in Canada, the WHMIS Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. Now, during the class, you may have questions. To ask questions, there should be in your control panel for Teams, there should be a button that's marked Q&A for question and answer. If you click on that, you can ask a question. That will be at the bottom of the pane. Let me just see if I can get my pen here. So you can type in your question. Don't be like me and often forget to hit that little button to send it. You have to tell it to send. And if it's something that one of our staff can answer, they'll give you an answer right away. If it's something that they feel that I should address, we'll leave them to the end of the presentation, and then we'll go through them together. And of course, if you have any new questions in, you can ask them as well. One question that people often do ask, will we be recording? We are recording, and the video of the presentation will be available for participants afterwards. So that question, the answer is yes, there will be a recorded version made available after the presentation. So our plan of attack for the day is we're going to start by looking at the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Pipelines and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, the agency in the DOT that deals specifically with hazardous materials. So this will cover the U.S. side of transportation of hazardous materials. Then we'll look at the requirements in Canada with the Canadian Transportation of Dangerous Goods regulations under Transport Canada. Then we'll take a look at anything interesting that's come up recently in international regulations, either from specific countries or from the agencies such as ICAO, IMO, or the IATA Dangerous Goods regulations. Notice a question came in about the Transport Canada issue with the telephone number on the lithium battery label. I will be addressing it in this presentation, and again, we can discuss it more if you wish after the presentation has ended. Then we'll end up finally with hazard communication, US OSHA, Health Canada, and the WHMIS regulations. And then there's a little bit this quarter about the European Union. So first of all, we have the US DOT. The Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration is the agency that's in charge of hazardous materials, broken into two sections, one for pipelines, one for hazardous materials. And the Office of Hazardous Materials Safety has issued a new organization chart as of April 2025. So to know who the players are, you can just go to this link, and I believe that they will be putting it in the chat if you want to save it, and that will let you check out who's in charge of what departments in FMCSA. There has been some top-down stuff going on with regards to regulations. One is Executive Order 14294. Now, this is not specific to transport of hazmat, but it will affect the hazmat regulations. This executive order is called Fighting Overcriminalization in Federal Regulations, and it's basically a policy directive to tell regulatory agencies that they should, in the word it uses, disfavor using criminal prosecution for violations, and instead to favor civil prosecutions. So criminal prosecution should be considered appropriate only for those who knowingly decide not to comply with the regulations. So it wasn't a mistake made out of ignorance, and it did risk serious consequences to the public. In other words, you decided you were going to break the regulations and you risked killing or hurting a lot of people. That would still be subject to criminal prosecution. Unintentional mistakes, not so much. They also want to move away from the doctrine of strict liability. In a regulation, that means that you can be charged even if you actually had no intention of causing harm or knowing even that you were violating the regulations. It's simply that you did something incorrect, you could be charged for it. And again, they want to move away from that with a concentration on charging criminally only people who knew that they were violating the regulations, or at least should have known. Civil penalties should be used wherever appropriate. And if you want to look at the text of this, because it's very significant to people dealing with any regulations, not just hazmat or OSHA, but it can be found on the US government website, and you can check out the text of it. It's not very long, but it is obviously a very significant one. Further policy changes. There has been a notice of proposed rulemaking. Now, this is specific to the DOT, but not specifically to hazmat. That this docket, which has been put as a notice of proposed rulemaking, it's not finalized yet, but it's up for discussion, would update the DOT policy and provide guidance for both rulemaking and for enforcement. Again, the stated goal is to prevent overregulation of industry and to avoid putting an excessive burden on companies. If you want to make a comment on this docket, they're due by June 16th, and you can access the docket again at this link. View it as a PDF. Again, it's very short, but they do want to see whether maybe they need to spend more time on trying to streamline the regulations and, as I say, prevent this over-regulation that the current administration feels is a problem for industry. Another one is an advance notice of proposed rulemaking. Now, this is a proposal. It's not really in a final form. It's more like they're starting to try and get feedback from stakeholders. So looking for feedback on identifying specific regulatory provisions within the hazardous materials regulations that you feel pose an undue burden. Obviously, for the safety of the public, there may be some burden, but we want to get the best, I say the best safety bang for the buck. So if you've got ideas where the regulations could be streamlined, removed, because they're just not giving us that benefit of the effort that's being put in, FMCSA would like to hear about it. They like it if you can break down not just what the area is, but the nature and magnitude of the burdens. If you can provide monetary amounts, that would be really persuasive. The government does like to see estimates of cost savings. Suggest how things could be made better. Maybe it's not simply get rid of this section, it's revise how it works. Again, assessment of costs and benefits, if you can anticipate it from such amendments. And on the other side, would there be any safety consequences, either things becoming less safe, or sometimes maybe you can get the best of both worlds. You can improve safety while also lessening burdens. Now, the comments for this advance notice would be due by August 4th, 2025. And again, you can see it in the Federal Register, and it'll tell you where to send the comments, either electronically or hard copy. Now, leaving FMCSA for a moment, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration announced at the end of last year, it's the tail end of 2024, that they are updating their registration system for carriers and freight brokers. And that will affect a lot of carriers who have hazmat certifications. So the system will create what they call the US DOT number. It's a reference number that says you've been registered. It will be required for interstate commerce of hazmat or intrastate if the vehicle requires a safety permit for hazardous materials. So again, you can find in the guidance materials exactly which carriers and brokers will be covered by this. Will apply to third-party carriers and also perhaps to some private carriers. There's a fact sheet here from the FMCSA that gives a little introduction, and there's a lot of other guidance information as well that would be available. So if you're a carrier, this is something to take a look at. We've got not a regulatory change, but a policy change. The DOT has issued a notice of enforcement policy regarding what's called real-time train rail consists. After the East Palestine derailment back in 2023, some of you may remember this, major train derailment, I think in Pennsylvania, there was a rather quick ruling made to require that railways, particularly the larger ones, what they call Class 1 railways, should be able to provide what they call real-time rail consists, which are transport documents detailing the information about the hazmat and emergency information, and that should be able to be provided to get eventually to emergency responders as quickly as possible. The Class 1 railways have not objected to the overall concept, but they just said that the time frame that was given was unrealistic. To be able to do this, there has to be a lot of work done for things like updating computer systems and how would you transmit this information electronically. So they petitioned FMCSA, said, could you kind of just hold back on this a little bit? So FMCSA said, all right, we'll issue this notice of enforcement discretion, basically telling inspectors, do not enforce this requirement on the Class 1 railways for an extra year. Now, there are some requirements. For example, you would have to tell FMCSA that you are planning on using this extension period. It's not just given arbitrarily. You would have to let them know that you are going to be using the benefit of this. The detail about it can be found on the FMCSA.dot.gov website, where they tell you how this notice of enforcement discretion is going to work. But it's much easier to do it like this than to try and amend the regulations to extend the time period. They're just going to tell inspectors, assume that it has a later time frame for implementation. In Canada, we have Transport Canada is kind of just starting to pick up the pace again. We've had a recent election, new Minister of Transportation, so things that were already being developed have sort of been paused. They're just starting to pick up again. But Transport Canada was down at the Costa conference this year and mentioned that these are some time frames that they're expecting for new regulations to come out. So probably the one we'll see most quickly, this was one that had been proposed a couple of years ago. They've been working on it ever since, but is a repeal of what they call bulk storage regulations. There are several. We'll look at it in more detail in a second, but they figured that this might come out spring, which looks like they're probably going to miss that, maybe summer. These estimates, of course, are not carved in stone, but the work really has been done on this. It's just a matter of repealing these regulations that they feel are no longer really meeting the needs that they wanted, and maybe come up with a different system regarding storage. This is not part of TDG, by the way. These are separate regulations all on their own. The next thing that they're looking at, which hopefully will be out towards the end of the year or start of next year, is the desperately needed international harmonization amendment. Now, this has been on the go for some time, where they want to make some changes to update to a more recent version of the UN recommendations. And somebody just mentioned one of the questions that came up in the chat quickly was regarding would the telephone number on the lithium battery handling mark, would that be removed? And that's something that needs to be done for harmonization. So if they get the harmonization amendment through end of this year, start of 2026, then we would have it done by the time that the international regulations are making it mandatory to get rid of the telephone number, which would be ideal. If they don't get it done in that time, then there's other things that we may have to do as workarounds. There's another amendment they're doing called the Canadian update. These are changes being brought in that are not specifically for international harmonization, but are more things just that Transport Canada is planning, and that is currently looking at the first half of next year. And these would all be, they say Canada Gazette 1. The CG2 stands for Canada Gazette 2, which is like a final rule in the US. It is when it becomes officially an amendment and can be put into the regulations. Before that, it has to go into Canada Gazette 1, And we do have an amendment that we've been working on. It's kind of an interesting one, but it's dealing with transport of dangerous goods by drones. So that is called remotely piloted aircraft, or RPAs, and that would allow at least small amounts of certain dangerous goods to be transported by drones. For example, limited quantities might be an option, or low-powered lithium batteries. Also, another thing they're looking at is in cases of accidents or emergencies when dangerous goods cannot get by truck to the scene of the accident, then we could take them in by drones as a safer manner of delivery. So that's an interesting one, and certainly I'm looking forward to see how that is going to develop. Now, another question that came up in the chat, I noticed, was a question about the new packaging standard that has been announced, the CGSB 43.150. Now, this has been published under the care of the Canadian General Standards Board, and what it is intended to do is replace the current standard, which is basically just under the control of Transport Canada directly, called TP 14850. That standard currently has two parts. Part one will tell you how to get a non-bulk package, a small means of containment, approved as UN specification, and part two tells you how to select packaging for specific products. The problem with TP 14850 is that it is old. It is dated 2010, so many of these packaging authorizations are well out of date compared to the current UN recommendations. So the CGSB standard is published in 2025 and will be run under the CGSB. The CGSB will make these packaging standards, normally they are available for free. You do have to register with their website, but normally then they are downloadable for free. So that will be an advantage. The problem is that we can't switch to the CGSB standard until TDG says this is the standard to use for small means of containment. And of course that means that we would have to look at one of these amendments that they're coming out with that would change the text to replace references to TP 14850 to the CGSB 43.150. And again, when those changes will be made, again, hopefully sometime this year or early next year. But as far as I know, Transport Canada has not made any plans to authorize 43.150 outside of amending the TDG regulations. And if you want to take a look at it, Transport Canada has a notice on their website referring to the publication of this standard. But I've looked at it and it does, I think, do a much better job. TP 14850 was a good standard, but it is well out of date now, and we desperately need something that is updated. Now, these bulk storage regulations that they're talking about repealing, these, again, are not part of TDG, but they are under Transport Canada. There were 4 of them. One is the ammonium nitrate storage facilities regulations, then the anhydrous ammonia bulk storage regulations, the chlorine tank car unloading facilities regulations, and the handling of carloads of explosives on railway trackage regulations. So they felt that these had outlived their purpose, that by removing them, they could then enhance clarity for people involved in these sorts of storage activities, remove ambiguity between different regulations, and strengthen the current regulatory framework. It is hoped by Transport Canada that they can get a Gazette 2, which will simply say these are repealed and we do not have a direct replacement for them currently. That will hopefully be out by mid-year. And if you ship flammable liquids by railway tank car, you probably are aware that both Canada and the United States have been phasing out the common type of railway tank car called the Class 111 tank car, phasing it out for use with flammable liquids. Now, this was begun after the Lac-Mégantic derailment and resulting fire and explosion that took the lives of nearly 50 people. And it was determined that the 111 tank cars were perhaps not strong enough for safety when shipping flammable liquids. So both Canada and the United States decided to slowly phase them out. These are expensive containers. You can't just say day one, let's get rid of them, or at least get rid of them for flammable liquid usage. So there's been a prolonged phase out period, but it's coming to the end. Canada has another TP standard, TP 14877, which is for railway tank cars. And in that, clause 10.5.6 is basically banning both legacy and enhanced Class 111 tank cars, both jacketed and unjacketed, for Class 3 flammable liquids as of May 1st, 2025. So the legacy ones were the ones that were the design that was being used at the date of Lac-Mégantic. There was some changes that were made to the design sort of as a holdover to try and improve them until they could be phased out. But as I said, they are basically no longer allowed to be used for flammable liquids. And again, they don't mention other classes of dangerous goods, just flammable liquids as of May 1st, 2025. Now, the United States, again, learned the same lessons from Lac-Mégantic. They decided that they would phase out the 111 tank cars for flammable liquids as well, but on a more gradual schedule. So they also have sort of an end of an era of May 1st, 2025, but that is when they will be prohibited from flammable liquids in packing group 1. In other words, the most dangerous flammable liquids. Flammable liquids in packing group 2 or 3, they can continue to use the 111 tank cars until 2029. So they've got a 4-year extension that does not exist in Canada. So Americans shipping into Canada should remember that Canada will not accept 111 tank cars for packing group 2 or 3 after our date of May 1st, 2025. So if you are shipping into Canada, the 111 tank cars are gone here in Canada. Transport Canada has a announcement about it, which is you can see here. You can take a look, talking about the phase out and time frames for these cars used for flammable liquid service. Again, it's just flammable liquids. It is not all hazardous materials. than that, Transport Canada doesn't have a lot of news right now. They did add a new frequently asked question to their list of frequently asked questions on their website. Unlike the DOT, Transport Canada does not have a database of official interpretations. But they do have their FAQ, which addresses, as I say, frequently asked questions, trying to give a general interpretation that Transport Canada is using. So if you do have questions, you can go to Transport Canada, but you're not likely to get a nice letter like the DOT might provide saying this is our official interpretation. But if they're getting a lot of questions on the same topic, they can add it to the FAQ, giving a general policy. This one is dealing with compartmentalized highway tanks. It's just tank trucks that have different compartments. One of these compartments is holding UN 3475, and that is ethanol and gasoline mixture, or as industry sometimes calls it, gasohol, a mixture of gasoline and then ethanol to preserve petroleum stocks. So if this is shipped in a compartmentalized tank by highway, one compartment holds the ethanol and gasoline, the other has a flammable liquid, but the flash point is different than the UN 3475. There was some debate over exactly how you're supposed to identify it, and they've clarified that in this situation, the UN number for ethanol and gasoline mixture, which is 3475, must be displayed in addition to the UN number for the dangerous goods with the lowest flash point on each side and on each end of the compartmentalized means of containment. And they've got some illustrations in this FAQ how they want it to look. So again, there's a link if you are involved in compartmentalized tanks and gasohol, then this will give you some guidance. So apparently they have had a number of questions about dealing with this. Another thing they published on their website is a safety advisory regarding what they call sour crude oil. Unfortunately, a lot of Western crude is what they call sour. It contains a lot of what's called hydrogen sulfide, which can off-gas, and it's very poisonous. So your petroleum might not just be flammable, it might be poisonous as well. And question is, and I've known that this has come up in the past here at ICC, is how exactly would you classify sour crude? The UN has created a new shipping description for it that indicates that it is sour crude oil, but how do you make that determination? So they've got a safety advisory talking about the issues involving hydrogen sulfide in petroleum crude and how to deal with it, particularly from a classification standpoint. And everybody's favorite situation that's getting people kind of nervous right now, lithium batteries. In Canada, Special Provision 34 of TDG addresses low-powered lithium batteries, and it has not been updated for a considerable period. So, again, the rest of the world is sort of moving ahead, and that's causing problems for shippers or receivers in Canada. So, a couple of things that Special Provision 34 has not been updated to reflect. The UN came up with the idea on request from companies like ICC who print these marks to reduce the original size that the UN had come up with which was slightly rectangular, reduce it to 100 by 100. Make that the minimum size because it's easier to print that way. That's only a very small reduction. Size should not be a safety issue. So again, if you look at ICAO, IMDG, even 49 CFR now, they will have this as the minimum size. It can be larger if you want, but this would be the minimum size. And of course, the big one is that originally these marks were supposed to include a telephone number for more information, which had never really been clarified by the UN as to what this number was supposed to be for or how it would be helpful. And apparently the UN got sick of questions about it and eventually decided to get rid of it, with the plan that it would be made optional for a few years, and then on January 1st, 2027, it would be eliminated, and you would not, technically would not be allowed to include that number. So most of the world, now the number is optional, but people are trying to get their labels printed or boxes pre-printed. If they want to make a significant amount of stock, they may still have stuff available after January 1st, 2027, so they would prefer to take that telephone number off. But in Canada, there is absolutely nothing in Special Provision 34 that authorizes that. So that is a headache. And the question is, when are they going to get rid of it? And again, we would have to wait probably to the harmonization amendment. And hopefully, because the Canada Gazette one version of the harmonization amendment, which came out several years ago, did not mention the telephone number issue, but hopefully they have updated it because, I mean, it's not like lithium batteries are a rare product. So hopefully when the harmonization amendment came out, they would follow the UN and say, up until the end of 2026, you may have the number. After that, you should not have the number. Unfortunately, until that is done, there's nothing in TDG that authorizes you to leave the number off the label. If this is an issue, the best solution would be to go and get a permit, an equivalency certificate from Transport Canada. Now the good news is there has been at least one trade association that has gotten a permit like this that would allow you to follow the UN standards as they're currently written for size and for eliminating the number. The bad news, of course, is that if you're not a member of that trade association, that certificate would not apply to you. But since it's been issued for one group, it should be reasonably easy to get it to be issued to other groups or other companies on the grounds that if it's safe for one group of people to do, it should be safe for everybody to do. So if this is a concern, again, there is no guarantee when Transport Canada will publish their harmonization amendment. And again, you know, they may even tell you, oh, yes, we're sure it's going to happen then, but they can still, something can come up and then their deadlines are not guaranteed. But if this is something that you feel could be a problem for you in the future, I would recommend contacting their permit division and see if you can get an equivalency certificate that would allow you simply to leave that off. And you shouldn't have to do a lot of legwork for it because it had a similar certificate has already been issued to at least one group. So check with your trade associations. You might already be authorized to use one. If not, then just go to Transport Canada. International developments. Usually around mid-year, this is kind of boring because remember the big changes are normally made at the start of the year. But IATA has issued an addendum for this year's edition. That's come out April 30th. It is fairly extensive. There have been a lot of changes, particularly to the state and operator variations. New variations added, existing variations changed, some of them deleted. There have been changes to a number of special provisions. And for those of you dealing with the wonderful new sodium-ion batteries, they are still trying to tweak these and fix some stuff that they had missed in their first pass to update for shipping these in the same way as lithium batteries are shipped. And again, they've just noted some mistakes, typos, and so forth, which have been corrected to make it more accurate and easier to read. So that is a free download. You can get it on the IATA website, but if you get the electronic version of the IATA book, it will be, one of the nice things I like about the electronic version is they push these addendums to you automatically. So you just log in one day and it says, hey, some new content is being added to your book, and you don't have to do anything or worry about having to miss it. By the way, something I don't have a slide for, but those of you who have the electronic version of the IMDG code for shipping dangerous goods by ocean, they have, and sort of in the middle of the year, reformatted how that electronic version works, and I am very impressed with how much better and easier it is to use. Up until now, I've been calling the electronic IMDG code a glorified PDF. It didn't seem to take advantage of the benefits of being an electronic code the way the IATA book did, but they've made it much easier to use, and it's something I can much more strongly recommend than it used to be, because originally it was very hard to work from, and the usability has increased a lot. IATA has also, to try and help shippers, published a memo that they sent out to the airlines and freight forwarders regarding the dangerous goods declaration about rejections for minor discrepancies. In other words, they're basically telling these airlines and freight forwarders, yeah, let's not be insanely picky over things. Try not to refuse shipments for trivial issues that don't have no effect on safety. For example, at one point they, on their column headings, one of their columns was subsidiary hazard, and they changed that to subsidiary risk. But people were being rejected because they had an older version of the form that said hazard, not risk. And IATA says that is not likely to be misinterpreted. It really shouldn't be a cause for rejection if that's the only problem. Another one is they have eliminated the requirement for the job title and the place where the document was signed. If the information is provided, though, and it doesn't interfere with other information, IATA says, is it really worth rejecting it because people have provided more information they need rather than less? And apparently they've heard reports of things being refused because of varying font sizes or typefaces or lines that were solid lines in the example in the book, but they were dotted lines or dashed lines in the printed version. They said these are not going to create confusion. There is no safety issue, and if those are the only problems with the declaration, it should not be refused. Unfortunately, this is not a guarantee that your airline will be rational about things. You know, it's still up to the airline whether they think that saying hazard versus risk, if they think that that is an issue to refuse it, they will still refuse it. But at least it's trying to get airlines to recognize that minor issues are not likely to be safety issues and would have fewer rejected shipments. At least fewer rejected for silly reasons. Just some notes I was going through. There's been some movement in Mexico. Mexico doesn't have one dangerous goods regulation. It has a number of what they call official Mexican standards, or NOMs, for official Mexican norms. There are a couple that should be published this year as final versions. One is on limited quantities, and that's supposed to be updated to the 22nd edition of the UN. And one thing that it should do, which will make people shipping limited quantities into Mexico happy, is eliminate the need for a dangerous goods shipping document, which in Canada and the United States you do not need. Mexico had not mentioned that as something you're exempted from as a limited quantity, but hopefully, apparently the draft of this will say you will not have to list them as dangerous goods on the paperwork. Another one is a revision to the general things about marking, labeling, and placarding. So we will make sure that presumably they will be up to date with the current UN. And they'll be working on an NOM on compatibility and segregation, one on infectious substances, classification, packaging, and hazard communication, and a revision of their standard on classification of dangerous goods in general. So if you ship to Mexico or through Mexico, these are some changes that will be made. They should be available online, but they will of course be in Spanish. The DOT used to translate them, but I haven't noticed them updating them recently. However, nowadays, there's artificial intelligence, which, while may not give a completely accurate translation, should at least be able to give you the gist of what one of these NOMs would be saying. And to finish off, we've got our hazard communication. In Canada, for WMIS, there is an annual adjustment to the fees if you want to apply under the Hazardous Materials Information Review Act. That would allow you to conceal ingredients or concentrations of ingredients as trade secrets. But unlike in the United States, you must make an official application to this commission, and there will be a fee, which gets updated yearly based on cost of living. So that has been updated. Health Canada has been slowly plugging through millions of chemicals, doing reviews of common chemicals at least, and providing information that could be used for classification under the WMIS system. So they have published 6 new ones recently and revised one. Acetone was about the first one that they published. Apparently they've gone back with new information to revise it. And then new ones for methylpyrrolidone, cristobalite, DGBE, I forget what that is, ethylene glycol, styrene, and silica quartz. Oh, here's the table for the updated fees for making applications to HMRI, the Hazardous Materials Information Review Commission. So again, it is not a completely inexpensive proposition. People will normally not apply unless there is a darn good reason why they think they have a valid trade secret. So it can be hundreds or thousands of dollars to make an application. OSHA, I've heard some rumors that there may be something coming out regarding the hazard communication standard maybe this year. Haven't been able to find out exactly what that would be. The only thing I found that was really interesting going on OSHA right now is they are doing an information gathering request regarding respirator program records requirements under the Mine Safety and Health Act to see whether there's a excessive paperwork burden on employers. For example, there's a requirement to save copies of your fit testing results on respirators for your employees for at least, I think it was 5 years. So they are just asking companies who are affected by this act to please let them know if they think things need to be changed, if they're too onerous, or whether they're working fine. Again, comments should be sent into the Office of Management and Budget by June 23rd, 2025. And there is a link if you feel that you do have comments. And I don't normally talk about Europe here, but Europe has published at the end of 2024, they published changes to their classification, labeling, and packaging, or CLP regulation, which is their version of WMIS and the OSHA Hazard Communication Standard, based strongly on the GHS. So I think it's interesting, not just for people who are trying to sell product in Europe, but also to see what may be filtering down into North America in a couple of years. One thing to remember, though, is that this regulation is not just, in Europe, it's not just a safety regulation, it is also an environmental regulation. So it's much more heavily weighted on environmental hazards and issues than just physical or health hazards. So if you want to take a look at the actual proposed change it's passed now, the change regulation, EU 2024/2865. There is our link. Changes in this will include things like the label must identify an EU supplier. It can no longer say North American supplier, it must be EU, or the UK uses a version of this, so if you're selling in the UK importer distributor would have to be identified. They made some updates to the classification system, again, primarily by bringing in classifications for environmental hazards. Now, these would not in North America be used to classify a product under WMIS or OSHA. But if you're selling in Europe, these are things you will have to consider. It will address things such as PBTs, which are persistent mobile and toxic chemicals. Endocrine disruptors are a big issue right now, so endocrine disruptors would have to be identified. And they've established criteria for naturally occurring complex mixtures. There will be reduced labeling requirements for containers less than 10 milliliters. And they are coming up with some interesting ways of dealing with issues regarding labeling. For example, fold-out labels. Originally, they were allowed on very small containers where you couldn't fit the full label on, but they've extended it so fold-out labels could be used for all containers of all sizes if you feel that that's necessary to put on all the information you want. They're also starting to use digital labels. Now, these would be primarily for supplemental information. The container itself would still have to have its basic GHS information on it, but you could also have something like a QR code or a link where you could look at a digital label, and that might be able to go into a lot more detail, providing information about safe handling. Now, there are some issues about this. For example, not everybody, even today, can go online easily, but it certainly, I think, would help leverage technology to get information to people sometimes more easily. If the label has to be changed, so the classification has been changed or the information has been changed, there will now be set time frames how quickly the label has to be changed and customers notified. So if you are selling to Europe, this is something to look at. And of course, I think things like digital labels will be coming to North America eventually. There are a lot of hurdles, but I think eventually it may be a matter of rather than running and getting a safety data sheet for a product, you scan it on your phone or a tablet, and that can give you all your information right at your fingertips, which I think will make things move a lot faster. Anyway, just to end up, keep in mind that ICC has all sorts of resources to help you. If you go to our website, there will be a section called our Help Center. We've already got over 1,000 articles, including frequently asked questions and blogs on things from new regulations, regulatory change, or interesting topics. I kind of like looking sometimes back at the history of dangerous goods, but there's a lot on specific things like lithium batteries, various aspects of those, or certain types of waste. So please check out our website. One thing that we have that we do encourage people to sign up for, we have a free newsletter that you just have to give us your email, and we will send this out whenever there's news, just so that you can be kept up to date. So I say, please consider that. I think you'll find it useful and helpful. A couple of other things. We are on LinkedIn. So if you use LinkedIn, you can find us as company, just Compliance Center. And on YouTube, we have recorded versions of these webinars, as well as many other videos, which are kind of helpful, things like packaging standards and things like that. So please check us out on YouTube as well. So now is the time for questions, and I can see there are a number of them. So I will go through them, answer the ones I can. If I can't answer them, we'll see whether we can get you the information later on. First one says, is TDG doing anything related to electric vehicle battery cells or battery packs for vehicles? The UN is certainly doing something about them, coming up with new shipping descriptions, but I wouldn't expect anything before the harmonization amendment comes out. There's nothing that I think would be faster than that, and hopefully the harmonization amendment of TDG would incorporate what's in the current UN recommendations. Again, if these are issues for you, I do recommend that you let Transport Canada know. They won't normally fix things until they realize that they are problems for Canadian industry. Then we have one from David Cox, says, will there be new TDG regulations on EV batteries or data center batteries over 300 watt hours? Again, I would presume they will follow what the UN does, but I don't think they're going to create anything really from scratch anytime new. They've got a lot of catching up to do, and I think that will be their main concern. But if it's in the UN and they can just easily port it over, I would expect it to be in the harmonization amendment. Question, can you share who you're using for the IMDG code electronic version? I'm just using the one published by IMO. It's approximately the same price as the hard copy, and to say they've just, in the middle of things, made a change that has made it much more usable. So if you go to our website, you will see where you can purchase it through us, or other vendors, of course, would have it as well. Okay, and most of the other things in there were just the links. And we've answered the questions on TP 14850 and removing the telephone number. I think I've answered all the questions. Pam, have I not?
You're good.
Yeah, all right. Okay. All right, well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you have a great summer, and I hope that we see you in September, I believe, is when the next third quarter version will be provided. And please join us, and if we can help you with anything before then, please feel free to contact us by phone or on our website. We do have a chat function. Or just email us. There's my email address if there's questions we can help you with. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you, as the song goes, in September.